The year 1812, the Russian campaign. The events of 1812 are central to understanding Napoleon's downfall. Prelude to the invasion. Continental system. Napoleon imposed the continental system to isolate Britain economically. This led to growing tensions, particularly with Russia, which had been trading with Britain despite Napoleon's wishes. The Grand Duchy of Warsaw. Napoleon's allies in Eastern Europe, particularly the Kingdom of Saxony, were pushing for Napoleon to pressure Russia, which he had long viewed as a rival. Napoleon's ambitions. By 1812, Napoleon's empire stretched across much of Europe. He had an ego-driven desire to assert his power even further, especially after the failure in the Iberian Peninsula. The invasion of Russia. The invasion force. Napoleon amassed the Grande Armée, a massive force of over 600,000 men, including soldiers from France and his various European allies. Initial successes. The invasion began in June 1812, with Napoleon's army crossing the Neman River into Russia. The Russian forces, under Tsar Alexander I, retreated rather than engaging Napoleon's army in direct battle, adopting a strategy of scorched earth, burning crops and villages, to deprive the French army of supplies. The Battle of Borodino. September 5th to 7th, 1812. The two armies finally met at the Battle of Borodino, a bloody confrontation that saw massive casualties on both sides. While Napoleon claimed victory, the Russians were not decisively defeated and retreated further into Russia, delaying Napoleon's forces. The occupation of Moscow. September 14th, 1812. Napoleon reached Moscow, only to find it largely abandoned and set on fire by the Russians. The Russian winter was approaching, and the French army was ill-prepared for the harsh conditions. No peace negotiations. Napoleon had hoped to force Tsar Alexander to negotiate for peace by occupying Moscow, but the Tsar refused to concede. Napoleon's situation grew desperate as the French army struggled with supply shortages, the harsh winter, and the ongoing Russian resistance. The retreat. October 1812. With no decisive victory and winter closing in, Napoleon was forced to retreat. The retreat from Moscow became a disaster. Russian forces harassed the retreating French, and starvation, disease, and cold weather decimated the Grande Armée. December 1812. By the time Napoleon and what was left of his army crossed the Neman River to return to France, fewer than 100,000 men remained out of the original 600,000. Aftermath and consequences of 1812. The loss of prestige. The failure in Russia shattered Napoleon's reputation and the might of his empire. The grand illusion of invincibility was destroyed, and many of Napoleon's allies began to desert him. The Sixth Coalition. Following the defeat in Russia, a coalition of European powers, including Britain, Russia, Prussia, Spain, and Sweden, formed against Napoleon. The tide of the Napoleonic Wars had shifted. The decline of Napoleon, 1813 to 1815. The War of the Sixth Coalition, 1813 to 1814. Napoleon faced a series of setbacks. He was defeated at Leipzig, the Battle of Nations, in 1813, marking the first major loss in a large-scale battle in over a decade. Napoleon's abdication and exile. By 1814, the coalition forces had invaded France. Facing defeat, Napoleon abdicated on April 6, 1814, and was exiled to the island of Elba. The 100 Days, 1815. Napoleon escaped from Elba and returned to France for a brief period known as the 100 Days, but his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, June 1815, ended his reign, and he was exiled to St. Helena, where he died in 1821. Conclusion. The year 1812 marks the beginning of the end for Napoleon Bonaparte. The Russian campaign was a catastrophic failure that led to the gradual collapse of his empire. Napoleon's military genius, once unrivaled, could not overcome the sheer logistical, environmental, and strategic challenges posed by the Russian campaign. The aftermath of 1812 set the stage for the eventual defeat of Napoleon in 1814 and his final fall from power in 1815.